Hi guys, Miss Horman again. So today we're going to work on the next three pieces in our contemporary unit. And so we're working on three very different pieces today. They're very different from each other. And we have our first full video sound installation. We had a hint of it with uh, the electronic superhighway, but that was actually a TV and neon and whatever. This is just simply video. It's not video set up in a like it doesn't have to be set up in a certain way. So we have this one, which is called The Crossing, and then we'll do this building, the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao, and then we'll do this wacky wild thing, which is color photograph and video. So let's start with The Crossing by Bill Viola. So Bill Viola is an American artist. He was born and raised in Queens, New York. His idea is to promote video as an art form, specifically video. And so his video installations are usually a full room installation where the video really takes up the whole room. Now, there are smaller installations. There's a very small installation at the American Art Museum in DC that's just one like 18 by 24 panel where a small video runs. But this one is really a huge room, 16 feet by 27 feet by 57 feet. So 16 feet high, 27 long, and 27 wide and 15 feet long. 57 feet long. And why does it look like that? Well, we're going to talk about that. But let's first talk about Bill Viola. So when Bill Viola was young, he fell into a pond, a lake, something, and he began to drown. And he almost died. And since then, he has been obsessed with the concept of water. He is also has become a Buddhist, so he's sort of obsessed with this sort of like Zen centering, cyclical nature of the world. And so because of that, when we think about it, we really remember when we talk about Buddhism, that water and fire are both very purifying. But water is purifying in most religions. When you think about it, Buddhism has water for purification, so does Islam, Christianity. And so we have a lot of religions where water is purification and where fire is incredibly important. Fire is lighting candles and things like that in Christianity, in Buddhism, in Sufism, Judaism. So there's lots of important things with fire and water, just across the board. When we think about our statue of Shiva as Nataraja, the Lord of the Dance, we remember that Shiva is surrounded by a ring of fire while standing on rivers that go beneath and next to. So, this concept of fire and water for purification and destruction and creation is really important. So when we get into this, this piece is called The Crossing. And I'll talk to you a little bit about it, and then I'll show you a little bit of it. So what are we looking at? We are looking at a room that has two color projectors, one on each end of the long 57-foot span, that project onto a single screen that hangs down halfway between the 57 feet. Okay, it's a single screen. Well, it's It's two screens back to back with black paper, but it looks, when it hangs, it looks like black fabric between, but when it hangs, it looks like it's a single screen. And one video camera, or one video machine projector projects on one side of the screen, and the other video projector projects on the other side of the screen. It's in a huge room. There are giant speakers on each side, and you come into the room, and this is the image given to you by the College Board, which is unfortunate because it really should be this image. Because when you come into the room, there is a video, when you first walk in, there's a video of this man, and he walks up, and a fire begins at his toes and goes up and 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 up. And then eventually he becomes completely obliterated by the fire. And all you see is just fire. And then when that is over, you walk around the video screen, you go to the other side, and the same man walks up, and there's a drip, drip, drip of water, and then more and more water. And then eventually there's so much water that you can't see the man and he's gone. And so it's meant to be a process, the crossing from fire into water, from existence into nothing. And so you walk in and you see the man obliterated by fire, destruction, and then you come around and you go to the other side and you see the man with water, which is purification. And so we have this great idea of these things that are opposite each other: life and death, fire and water, light and dark, the birth and destruction. So we have this really cool thing. And what's awesome about this video is it is really immersive, because when you're on the fireside and you are standing back by the camera, and the speakers are there, you really can hear the flames, like the licking, crackling sound of the flames. And then you go around the screen to the other side, and you can really see you can really hear the dripping and the splashing of the water. So it is fully immersive. And the artist is Bill Viola. The man in the thing, the performer, his name is Phil Esposito. You don't need to know that. But what's really cool about it is it's about 2.5 minutes on each side. So you're looking at a total 5-minute immersive thing. The fire begins at the feet and comes up. The water begins on the head and comes down. So you have those opposites as well. And then it's shot using a super, super, super high-speed camera so that he can get a very, very detailed film. And then he slows down the high-speed film to allow the viewer to get a full immersion into this. And then the video just repeats over and over and over and over again. Viola says he's really interested in sensory perception. He's really interested in the concept of the implied cycle of like purification and destruction and rebirth. He's really interested in Eastern and Western spiritual traditions, including and especially, he says, Zen Buddhism, Christian mysticism, and Islamic Sufism. So sort of those more transcendental versions of each of the religions. And so what you get is just this beautiful video that expresses all of those things. So at the end of this video, at the end of this unit, I usually show, or at the end of talking about this, I usually show this link. I'm going to put this link on the Google Classroom so that you can watch this. It's a version, a longer version, where you can actually watch the Bill Viola as a video. So I will make sure that I put that onto the Google Classroom so that you can watch that on your own. But that's Bill Viola. All right, moving on to our next image. So this is the Guggenheim Art Museum in Bilbao, Spain. So there are 3 Guggenheim museums. There's the cone-shaped one that was designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, which is in Manhattan. There is the Peggy Guggenheim, which is in a 14th century or 15th century Venetian piazza. One of those beautiful Venetian palaces. And then there's this, which is the Guggenheim at Bilbao. And so all of the Guggenheim museums are pretty much dedicated to um, modern art. And so that being said, you know that there's a certain, modernity to the art that is inside. And so usually there's a modernity either to the outside of the building, as is the case with the Guggenheim Manhattan or the Guggenheim Bilbao, or a modernity to the interior, which is the case with the Peggy Guggenheim Venice. So this one is in Bilbao, Spain, designed by Frank Gehry, who is still alive and still considered one of the greatest architects of our time. This was constructed in 1997 of titanium, glass, and limestone. And what's really important is that titanium. 1997, we really are at the beginning of super, super, super new modern materials, modern with a small m, not modern time period, but modern like appropriate to us, modern materials that we can use in a new way. And Frank Gehry, who is a Canadian American, born in Canada, lived most of his life in America, lives in LA and works in LA. So Frank Gehry practices art that's called deconstructionist, which is where you basically take what seems like an unstable environment with strange unusual spatial arrangements. So this building is weird looking. It looks like it's been taken apart and put back together, but not put back together correctly. And the inside spaces are not perfect, rectangles or squares like we're used to seeing. So this is called deconstructionist. And so Frank Gehry was fiddling around with a new concept of how to use different materials. And he came up with, because we are in the age of computers, a very sophisticated computer CAD software that allowed him to create construction tiles out of titanium. And those titanium tiles are very, very light. They're very highly reflective. They can drape and curl and do all kinds of cool things that typical metal cannot do. And so when you get up close to it, you can see, here you see your titanium squares. And if you look, you can see these odd little places where there's indentations in them. And that is because as the clips attach to each other and to the frame, the skeleton frame, they get these really cool divots and dents that make it seem almost scaly, but also it gives it more dimension because it gives it sort of a prismatic effect so that the light reflects off of it, as opposed to it just being perfectly flat where the light would just bounce in one place, it bounces in multiple places. I'm just seeing if I have another picture of the exterior, but I don't. So especially, like, you can see it right here, those little divots and dents right there, and they all, the sun reflects off of them. And so, you have this beautiful, beautiful building made of these wonderful titanium panels that Frank Gehry helped to design. And we get this bending, draping, wonderful thing. So let's talk about this building and Bilbao. Bilbao was a major shipping port. It was the place where boats would come in and out and move lots of materials in and out of Spain. But it's a little further in than they would like. It's not commonly used as a shipping port. It lost most of its uses as a shipping port and basically fell into pretty much ruin. And the people of Bilbao wanted sort of to revitalize their city. And so what they decided to do is, where all these industrial buildings were, they took out a whole section of them. You can see we're right here on the water. They took out a whole section of all of these, these big buildings for trade and stuff, like warehouses and things like that. And they built this. And this idea was to revitalize the downtown section of Bilbao. Now that they're not bringing all these boats in and out of the water and the river and all that stuff, to revitalize the downtown so that you could see the water and it was beautiful and there was something to look at and there was a vista and stuff like that. And it was the concept of revitalizing the city as a whole. It was so successful, this construction of the Bilbao Museum, the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao, it was so successful that now anytime a city tries to put up a cultural building, typically a museum, as a way to revitalize a downtown, it's actually called the Bilbao effect. It's actually named after this because when Frank Gehry was hired to design and construct the Bilbao, he knew that because it was the Guggenheim Bilbao, he knew that it was going to be compared to the Guggenheim in Manhattan. And he knew he had to do something that was big and flamboyant to go with the place where it is built because it had to match its site. But he also knew that it had to be different enough from the Guggenheim Manhattan so that people wouldn't be like, oh, he tried to copy Frank Lloyd Wright. He knew it had to be different and new, and it that is what really led him to work with this AutoCAD software that allowed him to develop the titanium so that he could do this really neat design. So the exterior, what's interesting about the exterior is that with the titanium, with this overhang right here, this little overhang that allows people to stand on this patio here and look over the river, even and when it's raining, and this little bit of glass wall you hear, it's almost impossible to tell what the interior looks like. This is a sculpture called Maman. It's a spider. Maman means mother, by Louise Bourgeois. It's very cool. I like it very much. But anyway, when you look at it from out here, it's very difficult to see what the interior would be like. And so the interior has 20 large gallery spaces on 3 levels, and then one super duper large gallery space that was specifically set aside for a sculptural installation by the metal artist Richard Serra. So we'll go inside and we'll look at this. So this is your second image. And so what you're doing is you're inside, look at all these crazy curved walls and curved glass and whatever. And what you're looking at is you're looking out through here. Okay. So you see this beautiful window, curved forms, a new media. So we're working with this titanium, and we get inside and we see all of this beautiful way that the spaces aren't blocked off into these rectangles and things like that. And so in interior wise, this is, if we were studying for the test, this is one of your images, but I think it's terrible. So I always use this one instead, which is here's the river. And here is the floor plan, and you can see as you look at it, and it even tells you it looks like a boat. When you look at it from the side, oh my gosh, Miss Harmon, I can see it. It does look like a boat, right? So what we're doing is we're looking at a building that is built on the river in a place that used to be for for industrial trade and things like that. And now we have this really cool asymmetrical interior and this really cool boat shape. And then when you look at it from above, it almost looks like a flower. And the galleries branch off here. And then you see this cool thing that's called the boat gallery. And what's amazing about the boat gallery is that when Frank Gehry designed this, he knew that he wanted to have this large scale piece by the metal artist Richard Serra, and he knew that it was going to be a permanent installation. And so he built this gigantic gallery to hold this piece of artwork. And so you see this person, and then you see this artwork, and it's huge. You can see a couple little people up there, and it just goes for forever. And you can get lost in it, and you can walk between these pieces of metal. So this is a permanent installation. And what's really cool is, remember I told you this is about the revitalization of downtown Bilbao. And so that as you're coming into the main part of the city, what would have been old, broken down, warehouses and things like that were torn down to make room for the Bilbao Museum. And so now you have this beautiful vista as you're looking down one of the main streets in Bilbao, and you see the wonderful museum that's there, and then Jeff Koons's ugly flower dog. So it's really a beautiful, beautiful piece. It's revolutionary. It's a new material. It's using computers to design. It's about contrast between the old and the new. It's about contrast between the straight and the curved. It's about contrast between the dark and the light. It's just really a beautiful, beautiful building. And it's stunning, both inside and out. I'm a big fan of it. I've been to it, and so to walk through the the size, the enormity of this building is really, really quite something. If you ever have an opportunity to get to Spain, and more specifically to get to Bilbao, I highly recommend it. It's just a stunningly beautiful building. And then our last image for today is this one. This is like something we have not seen. We've seen video, we've seen photographs, but this is video and photograph. And your descriptor here is a little bit not quite accurate. Again, it's one of the few places where I have, some real arguments with the College Board. This is this particular still shot, color photography on glass, except this piece is not really about still shots. This is actually it's a video installation as well. So your artist is Mariko Mori. It's 1998. And what's really cool about this is a multi-sensory experience. There's a 7-minute 3D video. And in the 7-minute 3D video, you see the video that includes Mariko Mori in a particular traditional dress, and we'll talk about that in a minute. You see these little animated aliens. Yes, that's what you're looking at. If you thought that's what they were, you were right. So you see these little animated aliens playing musical instruments, moving about the screen and making their little music while she is humming and whispering as if meditating. In the background, you see this little guy here that is meant to represent a stupa, like the Great Stupa of Sanchi. And when in our still picture, these little guys seem blurred, and that's because they're moving much faster than everyone else. Now, what's interesting with this photograph, as I said, is you're looking at a picture of the Dead Sea in Israel, and so you have this picture of the Dead Sea in Israel, and then you have her laid over top of it, and then you have the aliens also laid over top of it, plus the illustration of the lotus laid over top of that, and then she is dressed as a goddess. So let's talk about each of these things in separation from each other. So let's start with her. She is a Japanese artist who believes in creative interpretation of traditional Japanese forms and mixing those traditional Japanese forms with futuristic elements. And so she focuses on video editing, as you can see with our little aliens, and also including, much like Cindy Sherman, so you can compare this to Cindy Sherman, including herself in the piece, but in costume. It's not a self-portrait. Now, what you see is you see her during sunrise at the Dead Sea. And what's cool about the Dead Sea is it's the lowest place on Earth, so it's super, super salinated. If you've probably seen pictures of people floating on it, there's no fish, there's no plant life. Those can't be sustained because the salt content is so high. And why does she pick particularly the Dead Sea? Because in the Shinto religion, one of the Japanese religions, salt leads to purification. So here we have this echo of traditional Shinto religion. We have salt for purification. Then we move into her, which is she is dressed as the god Kichoten. And Kichoten is the essence of beauty and brings happiness and prosperity and good to the world. Now, Kichoten is floating above the lotus blossom, which is in Shinto and Buddhism the symbol of purity and rebirth and birth into paradise. And so she's floating above that, and in her hand she holds what is called the wish granting jewel, and it allows her to bring good and deny evil. And the jewel that is in her hand is also symbolic of the jewel that is the Buddha's universal mind. So we have these traditional things, these new things. Then we have these animated figures that are running around on clouds, and those are sort of a a reference to sort of the super consumerism of the current, Japanese culture, and how doesn't seem to fit with the traditional idea of Japanese religion. What's beautiful is her robes blend with that background. They're all of just generally the basic same color. And, she is humming and whispering as if she is uh, meditating or chanting. The little aliens are playing music. A little fan would have been blowing scent of blossoms into the room, because she wanted a multi-sensory experience. So it was always shown in a small image, a small room, the video. There was never more than 20 people at a time allowed in. And so that was this very intimate experience. Lots of implied movement, even in the photograph, lots of real movement in the video, lots of elaborate costumes that were all designed and created by Mariko Mori and then worn by Mariko Mori for this kind of like Cindy Sherman. She has her hands in the teaching mudra, like the Buddha. And what is interesting about her is she takes her love of art, and she was also a model for a while. She studied fashion at the Tokyo Fashion Institute. She was a model in the 60s. And so she takes all of that and blends sort of all of her experiences together into this single thing. So while this does say color photograph on glass, she prints her color photographs onto glass panels instead of onto paper. So it's a color photograph on glass, but it is really based on that 7-minute video. And so we cannot really separate ourselves completely from the video there. But at the heart of it, remember that what she's trying to do is compare traditional Japanese imagery and religion and belief and culture with sort of this new encroaching consumerism and sort of the overdone too much that becomes like Japanese, between animation and clothing and new ways of dressing, was just in what she believed was in contrast to the traditional Japanese way of doing things. And so this is Mariko Mori. There you see her with the jewel in her hand. So photography, modern interpretation of formal traditional forms. There's your lotus. And so it's just, it's strange because it's different, because it's new, because it's not something that we have seen before. And it is, as always, a comment on where we are going and what we're doing. So that is the end of video 6. And so now you can do your Google form for videos 4, 5, and 6 contemporary. And I will put that Bell Viola video onto the Google Classroom. So it should be there now, so that if you would like to watch the crossing, you could also watch that. I will clearly talk to you later. Bye, guys.